Yeah.
Let's start with the UFC main event, Dominic. And, we talked about it on Thursday. By the way, he's one machine now, then, man. If you can name where that movie's from, the quote that movie is from, then points to you.
Points. Free shirt down the line some point.
Yeah. Yeah. We had talked about this on, now Wednesday, I guess, but Friday when you guys saw it. This idea that this was the third straight fight, I mean, even maybe more than that, but the third straight fight where Yan was going in as a pretty heavy betting favorite. And the previous two tries have been that he had lost. And even if you want to dispute the Sean O'Malley loss, it was a very close fight, even though he was like a -4, 450 or something like that going in. So once again, he loses. And Dominic, I think this is the most thorough loss of his career here to Merab Dvalishvili. Yan had 3 losses before this fight. One was a DQ, or no, excuse me. I think he had 4 before this fight in his entire career. He had the loss to Rafael Stotts
way back.
1 DQ loss and 3 split decisions. If that don't tell you how competitive all of his fights have been through his career, then I don't know what does. And yet here he got completely outworked from pillar to post, from start to finish. 50-45s across the board for Merab. The best performance of Merab's young career. In a lot of ways, a legacy-making performance to really establish himself for any naysayers that were left about Merab, who saw the Jose Aldo performance and said, this guy is boring. He's catching Jose on the way down. He went 0 for like 17 on takedowns in that fight. He's not going to be able to do it against a guy like Yan, who's so much better at this point. And Dominic, I think he set a record for takedown attempts for one. And people said at the end of the first round, he can't keep this pace up. There's no shot. There's no shot he can keep this up for 20 more minutes. Dominic, if it tells you anything, at the end of the fight, Yan looked like he was much more exhausted than Merab was. And Merab did not slow down for a single second.
Yeah.
So my question for you, I want you, of course, give your thoughts on this performance for Merab. And we can kind of get more into, what this fight really does for him. And, there's obviously some very interesting elements to that question. And then we can get into a little bit about Yan and kind of where this puts him now, losing 4 of his last 5.
Yeah, that's crazy to say that too, because especially for you've always been so high on Yan, but the flowers, of course, go to Merab first and foremost. What a workhorse! There's not an engine or a motor in the UFC, maybe in MMA, that runs like Merab's. I mean, it's just insane. 49 takedown attempts. 49 takedown attempts. That's almost 10 per round. He was one shy of averaging 10 takedown attempts per round, and he landed 11 of them. I don't care what that percentage is. Those are insane numbers. And I'm going to not go like too crazy with this statement, but let's be honest here. It was his most complete performance, I think, as an all-around skill set that we've ever seen. Because on paper, he should have not even really been competitive on the feet with a guy like Petr Yan. And I'm not saying he worked him and outclassed him on the feet, but he held his own. He did damage. The calf kicks were very good.
Well,
he basically,
Dominic, I would say he got the better of the striking because ultimately Yan had to be so respectful of the takedowns. It opens up everything else.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, what a performance. And if this isn't a title shot earning performance, regardless of weight class, I don't know what you want to see. If you had questions about Merab's skills, about his, cardio, anything, because this was his first main event going 5 rounds, I feel like he answered every question. I love that we kind of have talked about that the last 2 weeks with some of these main events. What questions were answered? What questions are left afterwards? I like that. Maybe that's a new wrinkle we add to the show. But he answered a lot, man, for me. And don't get me wrong, the Jose fight was not fun from a fan perspective, but it still at least showed Merab's so strong. And he is just a good fighter, regardless of how it went. This one was just non-stop action for 25 straight minutes. I can't recall many performances since we've started this podcast that had a pacing like that from one fighter. So what a win. What a way to arrive in your first main event. It's one thing to win when you get that marquee spot, but to do this against an elite level talent and Petr Yan is just fantastic. And, before we get into what's next, give me your thoughts because I'm sure you have just as many praises as I do.
This is probably kind of transitioning a little bit, but to me, I can't help though, Dom, but you're right. Title shot earning performance if I've ever seen one. And he's doing it against a former champion, a former interim champion. I mean, DC called him a former two-time champion. For all intents and purposes, you can call him that.
Yeah.
And this is a guy who his record is not really indicative of the kind of talent he is. The Sean O'Malley decision is disputed. It was a great fight. He looked good in it. The Aljo loss, it happens. Aljo's really proving to be a very good champion at this point. And obviously, you look at what Aljo did when he took the back of like Corey Sandhagen in their fight, choked him out within 3 minutes.
Yeah.
With Yan, he had his back in multiple rounds and couldn't do it. And I think that speaks to just how good Yan is everywhere. DQ loss, Yan was dominating. Yes, these are all losses. I'm not trying to diminish them, but I'm just saying that the losing streak or the skid is not indicative of him slipping at all as like a top fighter.
Yeah.
And for Merab to go in here and make him look like a shell of himself for Yan, that says a lot.
Yeah.
And I knew Merab was very good. I knew he was elite in a lot of ways. And you could have even told me there's a world where he'd compete for a title. And I even questioned the betting odds about having Yan that big of a favorite. I still ended up putting Yan on a parlay. So if that tells you anything, is that I could have saw Merab winning this fight. But to do it in the fashion he did, shocking.
Yeah.
Shocking. I mean, I thought this fight was going to either be Yan really just outclassing him on the feet and maybe getting a finish, or a very, very close decision. Both guys having their moments, and then it comes down to the scorecards, which Yan has been in that position a few times. Like I said, 3 split decision losses. So that's not at all what happened. Merab, dominant, title shot earning performance, yet his training partner, his teammate, the man in his corner last night is the champion right now, Aljamain Sterling. Now, Aljo does have a scheduled title defense in May against Henry Cejudo. So for all we know, if Cejudo wins that fight, that could change a lot of what we're about to talk about here. But of course, DC asked Merab about that situation because they have said they will not fight each other. That's what they said. They're brothers. They don't want to fight each other. Well, Merab really doubled down on that a little bit in his post-fight interview. And basically called for the UFC to give him any of the guys that are kind of a fight away from he basically called to be like the guy to take out these challengers for Sterling. Like he was really it was a whole nother level of like just I guess that's a whole nother level of loyalty. To be clear, like to really ask for those kind of guys, like he wants a guy like Corey Sandhagen or a guy like Sean O'Malley or someone who is on the doorstep of earning a title fight. He wants to take them out so Aljo doesn't even have to face those kind of guys. I don't really think that's how it's going to go though, Dom. I mean, I think what worries me, Dana was asked this question at his Power Slap presser. And he said, as he's been very consistent on this issue.
That's true. Yeah.
When teammates and friends say they don't want to fight each other, he always says it's a terrible idea. And he said that as much here. He said he thinks it would be a very bad idea for Merab to do that. Because if you turn down, because I'm assuming the UFC may want to offer him a shot if Aljo were to win against Cejudo. If he turns that down, it's not going to be he gets a fight with like Sean O'Malley or Corey Sandhagen. Those guys, they don't want these guys that could be title challengers getting taken out before they even get to the dance.
No.
They're not going to give him a Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley is going to overstep him for a title fight.
O'Malley would, and the winner of Sandhagen Vera. Both would
Right.
overleap
Yeah, I shouldn't.
Vera
I've left
or
out Marlon
Merab.
Vera from
Yeah.
the he's obviously also in that discussion.
Yeah.
Merab would end up fighting like the winner. I said this for Yan on Friday, but Merab would probably get like the winner of a Song Yadong,
And
Ricky
Simone.
Simone,
Yep, for sure.
which that's a dangerous fight, but it's a guy that's not quite they're not quite in the contender discussion.
Yeah.
So it's a dangerous fight that doesn't feel like someone in Merab's position should take, but it's risky. And that's ultimately the fights he's going to be looking at
Yeah.
if he is to turn down a potential title fight. What do you make of this situation? Is there obviously we're not in a position to tell these guys what they should do. They ultimately I trust that they know better what's best for their careers than we do. But
Mhm.
if you're in that camp, if you're one of Merab's, guys in his circle, where are you leaning on this issue? What do you feel like Merab should do?
No, man, I feel like when guys make this decision with training partners and such, I I mean, I see it both ways. If they end up fighting each other, Usman Burns, just the most recent one that
Mhm.
comes to mind, then they do it. And, oh, well, I'm going to watch. Obviously, I'm going to watch everything. But if they choose not to, like, I have a certain amount of respect for that as well. They respect each other. They respect the grind that it took both of them to reach the top. And you don't want to be the one to take that from your brother. So I
Yeah.
understand it. So I'm never going to be one to, like, say they shouldn't do this. But I want Merab to get his stars. I want him to get his chance to become a champion. So as a fan, I do almost hate that it's like you're taking yourself out of the picture. And we talked about this probably a little bit too much on Friday than we should have, for today's sake. But I said, even if Aljo loses, it's not even a guarantee that Merab will get a title shot then, because Henry could potentially go to 145. Now, you did make a good point in the aftermath of that discussion, saying, "Well, I'm not so sure that like Sterling would get the vacant shot against somebody else," and I do agree. So maybe Merab will get in there against Sean O'Malley or whatever. But I really worry that he can just lower himself on the totem pole by making this decision. He didn't say anything about 125,
Yeah,
which
that sucked for me because
because this performance earned him a shot at 125.
yeah, it just
As long
sucks
as Pantoja
because
goes first, he
you know,
got the shot there.
I made the
Yeah.
call. I like Babe Ruth
Yeah.
pointed to the center field bleachers and said Merab would be the flyweight champion. I was hoping so bad, Dom,
Yeah. Yeah.
that he would call out or call for that title fight, and he didn't. And I
Yeah.
was sitting there like, man, it's not going to happen, is it? He's really going to stick at 135.
Yeah. And not only does he not mention that, but then he says, well, when Sterling goes to 145. And I'm like, what? That's happening? I didn't know that was a thing. I mean, so
Yeah.
is Aljo planning to go to 145 if he beats Cejudo? I mean, maybe. Maybe he does. It seems like the winner of that may just go to 145 regardless of who it is. So I don't know, man. I want him to get his chance because what I saw last night sure the hell looks like he could be a champion. And again, I know it's not going to happen, but him versus Aljo, that'd be pretty sick. I mean,
That
look at
would
their
be
styles. That is such a clash. They know each other like the backs of their hand, more so than what you would even see from Burns versus Usman. So, as much as I respect him and them making this decision to not fight each other, I kind of want to see it happen at the same time. And a lot rides on what happens in May. Don't get me wrong. I don't know. I just worry that he could get passed up. And for all we know, if he just loses one fight, if he slips up and loses to a Sandhagen, a Simone, a Yadong, it's going to be a while before I think he could get back because of this division and how
right.
nasty it is right now, man.
How nasty it is. And then for Merab, he's not one of the biggest known guys in the division.
Yeah, even after last night, he won't be. That's just the fact.
But after last night, he is at a hot point. Like he has hit
yes,
he's at a point where this is the time to really cash in
mm-hmm,
and put him in that position because his stock could not be higher.
mm-hmm.
But Dominic, if he skips over it, if he 6 months from now is fighting Song Yadong or Ricky Simone, all of a sudden it loses a little bit of that.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Um, It's kind of a shame. I know there's more that goes into it. It's not just that him and Aljo are buddies, training partners. Like, it's not just the brotherhood aspect or the loyalty, but Dominic, there's also the parameters around the fact that they train in the same gym. So
Yep.
a lot of
Yeah.
times when you've seen it in the past, when guys who train at the same gym are scheduled to fight one another, a lot of times one of the guys leaves and has to go train elsewhere. I remember specifically Donald Cerrone was scheduled to fight Mike Perry on one
Yep.
of those
Yep.
anniversary shows in Colorado. And Cerrone, that kind of severed the relationship between Cerrone and wasn't it Winklejohn?
Yeah. The whole
Or
gym, the whole
yeah,
relationship
because he felt like they essentially sided
chose.
with Perry,
Yep.
chose Perry, the younger fighter,
Yep.
and kind of obsoleted Donald from the situation.
Yeah.
And now Donald now he's retired, but then he's kind of started his own, like
Right.
started doing his own thing. Um, so I'm sure there's a little bit of like, we just don't want that kind of bad voodoo like in
Mm-hmm.
here. They're a tight knit group. They've had a lot of greats come out of there. Chris Weidman,
And it's
these
a
guys have,
small gym,
yeah. I mean, this is a small group of guys, but there's a lot of legacy that
Yes.
trains there. Matt Serra,
Yeah.
obviously one of the coaches there. So these guys, there is a sense of like there's more to it than just
Just
how
them.
specifically Aljo and Merab feel about each other.
Yeah.
It plays there's a little bigger picture to it. So when Dana comes down real hard on these guys who won't fight one another, I get it. I get it when it's situations like, wasn't there a time, Dom, when Anderson Silva was champion where he didn't want to fight? Like, I don't know if it was not Damian Maya.
I feel
It
like
might have
almost
been,
Brazilian fighters in
yeah,
general.
Brazilian fighters. And that
Yeah.
was a big thing back
Yeah.
then. And I know Anderson Silva specifically, there was somebody he specifically was like, I will not fight this guy. We're friends.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, but they don't train together. Like, why,
Mm-hmm.
Why can't you just fight? And,
Right.
you need to fight each other. Same with like Gilbert Burns you mentioned and
Yep.
Vicente Luque.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah.
So like these things happen, but it makes more sense when it's guys that train together that are literally in the same gym. I mean, there is more to it.
It's just
But
like
part of me wonders, like, we're talking about all this and we don't know what these two have actually had conversations about behind the scenes.
mm-hmm.
For all we know, Aljo has made it pretty clear that win or lose, he's going to
Yeah,
145.
that could be true.
And Merab even kind of said, when Aljo goes to 145, I'm right. So it's sort of like, it's almost like there's some conversation we've not
Yeah.
been made privy to
Yeah.
that Aljo's like for sure going up a weight class. And maybe that's the case. Maybe it isn't, but that would be the thing that makes sense here. Win or lose, Aljo go up and weight, and then that opens the door for Merab to fight for a title.
Yeah. We, in a way, just like, as much as we love to talk about what's next, we kind of just have to wait. We have to wait 2 months, see what happens with Cejudo and Aljo in the title fight. And then we'll talk about, Merab. We'll circle back. And by then, we will also have Marlon Vera or Corey Sandhagen, the winner of that, to talk about.
Yeah.
So
how
we'll
weird
see.
would it be if that title fight occurs for the bantamweight title and both guys win or lose, both go up and weight afterwards? Because if Cejudo wins, you would think he's going to go up to 145, and then let's say Aljo's just going up anyways. Like both guys fighting for the bantamweight title, no longer in the bantamweight division after that.
And it's like, if Cejudo loses, does he even bother fighting again?
I think it loses that luster of being a guy going for 3.
And then you have kind of a 3-man race because O'Malley's waiting it out. It's pretty clear at this point. He's not going to fight anybody else. He beat Petr Yan, regardless of if you think he did or not. He's up in the top 3. He's going to wait for a title fight. You'll have Merab, and then you'll have, I keep saying the winner of Sandhagen Vera because Sandhagen just, I could see him getting another chance, but especially if Marlon Vera wins, there's 3. You can only have 2. You know what I mean? So it's almost like last year. Remember when we kind of had the unofficial Bantamweight Grand Prix? It's almost like it's happening again this year. And it's kudos to the division and how good all these guys are. But This is a big month and a half for 135 pounds.
And and that's funny you just brought that up. And we're talking about it as if Merab is guaranteed to be given a shot.
Yeah.
And he should be off this performance. But Dominic, if that's really how things go, if Cejudo and Aljo kind of go up and wait, and that opens the door for those three guys, like let's say Marlon Vera does beat Sandhagen, there is no doubt in my mind the UFC want O'Malley Vera 2 over
Because
having Merab in that
exactly.
equation.
What storyline's bigger? A rematch with Sean O'Malley and Vera, especially because Vera's only skyrocketed since then, or Merab versus either of the two? What's
So
bigger?
Merab's just even though he
Yeah.
just had the best performance of his
Yeah.
career, it feels like there's so many ways where this could kind of not go well for him.
And especially, like, let's look at just the two, Merab and Sean O'Malley. They're coming off beating the same guy who had the better performance, Merab,
Right. Yeah,
but
clearly.
who's still the bigger name and is gonna get a title shot for sure, Sean O'Malley.
Yeah.
Eh,
It's the way the game goes.
yeah, man.
I'm not saying that I am, you know, I'm not saying that I wish that's how it would go. Obviously, we care about seeing the best fight the best.
Yep.
And
Yep.
Merab feels like he should be in that kind of fight.
For sure.
But I'm not going to deny I wouldn't be excited to see O'Malley and Vera potentially run that fight back. That'd be pretty sick. So,
Mm, mm.
I mean, let's